Welcome to Paranormal M, where every episode is a dive into the eerie unknown. Hit that subscribe button and enable notifications to catch all of our latest ghostly stories. Prepare for a chilling journey. Any ghost or creepy stories that you would like to share? I have one, which is one that only happened in 2023. My experience. I lived at the very top of Northern Ireland. I live on a beach town that's quite popular during the summer, warm weather. But this story takes place on the 3rd of January. The weather wasn't warm at all, so the beaches were empty. It was just after New Year's, so everybody was hungover. It was my mom's birthday, and every year on her birthday, we light a bonfire and do it on one of the beaches. Usually it's me, my mom, my granddad, my dad, my uncle, and my old friend of mine. But this time, my friend was sick. So was my uncle. So there was only me, my mom, my dad, and my granddad. Now, on to the actual story. My mom and dad had left to get some stuff from the shop. My granddad looked after the fire while I was just walking down to the sea. While I was walking down, I saw a boy. Now, this boy was 5 years old. He had blonde, short, curly hair. He was wearing a light bulb knitted vest with a white polo underneath. He had navy denim shorts. I never saw his shoes. I was confused when I saw him. There was no one else on the beach except me and my granddad. Indeed, Gecko. So I talked to the boy. I asked, "Hey, where are your parents?" He just replied back, "Over there." He was motioning over to the complete opposite side. I could see the other side, no one was there. I was confused, but just thought his family was in the car packing up. But I could speak to my granddad, and he shouted for me. I turned around straight away, but I quickly looked back at the boy so I could tell him to go back to his family. But the second I turned back to the boy, he was gone. I frantically looked around the beach. He was nowhere, and this beach was a clear beach. There was nowhere for anybody to hide. A couple of months later, I was thinking about it again. That's when I decided to ask my granddad if he saw me talk to anyone. She said he called me over because I was talking to myself. I still don't know what that was, but most likely it was a ghost. Now I will go outside and yell at the neighbor's dog for barking at nothing. My 3-year-old son seen a ghost. I've always believed in ghosts and the paranormal. I've never been able to see spirits, but I can usually feel their presence, sometimes their emotions. When my son was autistic, he was 3, 17 now. He lived with his dad's sister in a huge house. I don't know how old the house was, but one day my son and I were home alone and we were in our room playing. I was grabbing him by the ankles and flipping him over on his bed. We'd been doing this for about 30 minutes, and all of a sudden my son starts looking past me to the corner of the room and looks terrified. I should also mention that he was completely nonverbal until the age of 6. He grabs the blanket and throws it over his head. I pull the blanket off of his head and I say, "What are you doing, silly?" Still looking past me, looking pretty terrified. Put the blanket back over his head. Pull it off again, and I ask him what's wrong. He points behind me. I turn around, but I don't see anything. So I tell him, "Mommy doesn't see anything." Then he looks even more terrified and puts the blanket back onto his head. Again, I pull it off, and this time I ask him what he sees. He makes a motion like to demonstrate someone hanging and makes a face with his tongue hanging out. This time, I don't let him put the blanket back over his head. I tell him to wait a minute. I turn around in the direction he's been looking, and I say out loud, "Look, I understand you're probably trying to communicate with my son because you realize he can see you. But he knows that I can't see you, so it's scaring him, and he's autistic. I need you to leave, please." I watch my son's gaze follow from that corner of the room all the way to the door. He then looks back at me with a big smile on his face, claps his hands, and is ready to play again. If I hadn't been a believer before that day, I definitely would have been after that. Me too. Ghost disguised as my sister. Anybody have a name for this type of entity? The scariest moment of my life happened in 2019. My 15 female, at the time best friend. They were over and we were hanging out with my two younger sisters, 12 and 8 respectively, in the living room. We got up to go to the front door, which passed this house's main hallway. That lined all 6 bedrooms of the house. As we're passing the hallway, we all freeze as we watch a woman in an old-timey wedding dress walk from one room into another, leading a little girl who looked exactly like my younger sister by the hand behind her. We all stood shocked. We talked about the woman and quickly realized only my friend and I had seen this little girl. After a couple of hours, we kind of forget about it. This kind of thing is surprisingly normal in my house. We don't really know why. But later in the night, we split off. My two sisters go to their room 2 steps across the hall from mine. My friend and I sat in my room and in true teenage fashion pull out some weed and a homemade pipe. About 2 puffs in, I hear my youngest sister running down the hallway. My friend quickly threw everything under my blanket as I got up. My sister was banging on my door, begging me to let her in. I was scared that she would smell the weed, so I was fighting against her to keep it closed. The whole time she's screaming at the top of her lungs that they're coming, they're going to get me, help me. As I'm trying to keep the door closed, my friend has to get up to help, so I'm kind of talking to her through the door saying, just go to your room, I'll be there in less than a minute. After probably a minute, the banging stops all of a sudden. My friend and I look at each other, scared the commotion, look at my parents, and they're about to smell the weed. I take a deep breath and count to 10 before going across the hall to my sister's room. She has a loft bed, and when I walk in, no more than 15 seconds after this knocking stopped, she passed out in her bed. My other sister, Lacey, is in there, and I go, what'd she want? Lacey looks at me confused and asks who. I point to my youngest sister in response. Lacey goes, what do you mean? She's been asleep for 15 minutes. I just got out of her bed and I was headed to my room. At this point, I felt like I was being pranked. I walk to my younger sister, who can't keep a straight face to save her life. She's dead asleep. I check her pulse and it's calm. No way she could have been banging on my door, climbed up her steps, pretended to fall asleep, and slowed her heart rate in a minute that had passed. I bring Lacey to my room and I sit down with my friend. Explain to my friend that my younger sister was asleep and she immediately got so scared she teared up. Then I explained it to Lacey. She was banging on my door saying somebody was going to kind of get her. Took all of our body weight to keep the door closed. I swear it was her. Lacey says there's no way it was her. They were together the whole time. Now, my family definitely has at least one demon attached to us. It will show itself to us as other family members quite often. Usually it's just something that we see out of the corner of our eye or a shadow standing in a corner of a closet. There was something about this experience that was so bone-chilling. To have somebody not related to my family experience this. The struggle with this thing to keep my door closed as if it's using my sister image to plead for me to let it in or something, but what would have happened if I wasn't strong enough and it did get in? What was its end game? After that experience, I had seen it as my younger sister like a couple of other times, walking in doorways in the reflection of the window behind me while I did dishes. It's terrifying, but we've all mostly learned to live with it. Ghost stories. So this happened a couple of years ago, so my memory on this is kind of faded now. I think it was like 8 years ago. My father died in 2011. Me and my mom, my little brother, 2 years old, my sister and my nephew, 4 years old, moved to Germany after it happened. Also, my grandpa died a couple of months after my dad. At least I think, but I'm 100% that my dad shortly after my grandpa. Anyways, after we moved to my new house, my sister and my nephew came to visit. Kids were playing in the bedroom, my sister and mom were just talking. My brother and nephew ran up to my room, or rather to my mom and sister. They started talking about a man wanting to play with them, even described him as not tall, curly short hair and a beard. My mom and sister were kind of surprised, but brushed it off thinking that they're just imagining things. Next time my sister and nephew came, happened again. So this time my sister took out a photo of my grandpa and a photo of my dad, put them both on the table. She asked her son to go get her purse. Without even mentioning the pictures, my nephew said excitedly, "That's him! The man that wants to play with us." He was very nice. Pointed to the picture of my dad. Mind y'all, my father never met my nephew nor my little brother because, well, he died. But he was very excited to be a grandpa. My mom and sister were kind of spooked, and it happened a couple of times more. After that, I didn't want to be home alone because I was terrified. I was 11, and I didn't know about the story yet back then. I always felt watched. My dog was acting weird, sometimes even barking a little bit and screwing up the audio, looking at corners and barking at nothing. I always felt a kind of cold breeze when I went to check that she was barking at something and it was passing me. My mom felt a creepy vibe at her home. I don't know if she was spooked by what happened or if she really believed the paranormal was happening. Went to a church to ask what could really be happening. The priest told my mom that she had, any grudges against my father that she could forgive him for. That way maybe he can rest peacefully. Indeed, my mom has never forgiven my dad for killing himself, and me being the one to find him first by accident. One day she was home alone, and it happened. She got fed up with this creepy shit and she yelled out loud, "I forgive you. Leave now, please. This is scary." And since then, nothing has happened. My nephew said the man was gone. And yeah, since then, I believe in ghosts. Doll. I have had a doll now, I believe. That's the cause of everything behind what's going on. We moved to a new house almost 2 years ago. I had an experience. I was home alone, thought there was an intruder and called 911. Found nothing, felt crazy, just new house jitters. Whatever. But then knocking and tapping started happening. Okay, so something just happened, or just my birds in my room. The doll I keep in a box in the corner of the closet, that's which I found to be the most active. That's why I have a spirit board that doesn't have a planchette on it, just for decoration. I feel it's important to include those details. So this goes on for a minute, nothing too aggressive, turns off, lights on me, messes up with my electrics. It's an older house, so whatever. Knocking, taps, all things I could find some ways of saying it was other things. I got a new phone around Christmas last year, brand new. I was on call with my friend and we were laughing and having fun. We didn't really notice any noises even. The screen went completely black and I could only hear her voice in my blanket. Recently, same old, but it's been months apart between, but 2 growls. But with what happened this morning, sitting tight in this shaking like a leaf, no more excuses. I've nothing to explain it. I sometimes sleep with a pillow on my head or shoulder. It's weird, but I enjoy it. Well, I had it on my shoulder this time. Felt something like pressure on the pillow against my shoulder. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just my dog and he would move. I wish I would have just woken up more instead of trying to fall back asleep. I again tried going back to sleep. It happens again, but more pressure. It's moving quick. Now it's on my neck, feeling like someone's choking me. I didn't hear doors, we didn't have alarms. Kinda figured quick that it wasn't human. No way a human could feel like this and that quickly. I gasped and I'm trying to think about what to say, and I said Jesus and eased up. I caught my breath more and I said Jesus loves me and backed off. It felt like several hours, like something was watching me. The thing I find coincidental is the time when I woke up freaking out was a little bit past 3:30 a.m. I have my own beliefs, and not having a strong standing on any religion, I do wear an upside-down cross tattoo with like a moon, and I do have an ankh necklace. I'm not sure what to make of the situation. I'm definitely burning the board and the doll. I don't know what to do. I want it gone, even if it hurts because the doll was passed down. Now, this is just a quick rundown of this, not everything. I'm mostly wanting advice. I am burning the board later. The doll, started mostly in the corner, and that's where it growls. I'm sure once it's gone, it'll be calm. I've had pet birds come down randomly and pass, or get seriously sick and pass. I just pushed it off as other things, and now it's not in my head, though. The pillow doesn't move alone, and my neck wouldn't be hurting so much. Any advice on this would be amazing. I reached out to a paranormal investigator, and she said 40-plus experience. She would investigate the doll. It again was passing through the family. I do feel attached in a way, and it's a difficult place for me to try to think about it. The doll is porcelain. It's moved around my room in the past, from the floor to the shelf to my chest, from the shelf with its arms and legs moving. I put it up. It got calm for a while. Now I'm at a point where there's no excuses for this. My grandma lost her memory because of a ghost encounter. Let me explain. I was 8 and we lived in a joint family with all of my uncles, aunts, and cousins. My grandma used to rest in a chair outside her house. My mom would send me to get her for dinner. One night at around 8:30 p.m., I went to call Grandma for dinner as usual, but this time she didn't reply for several minutes. After a while, I got worried and called my mom. She also tried to talk to Grandma, but no response. After a while, Grandma started freaking out and screaming, "Who are you? Where am I?" And at this point, everybody came outside and Grandma started screaming and freaking out. Me and my older cousins, me being the youngest, freaked out and started crying. Our parents sent us inside the house, but my cousin stayed by the window, and so did I. After what felt like an hour, my uncle, who's well educated about such situations and ghost encounters, came home. We told him about what was going on. He started questioning my grandma like, "Who are you? What do you want?" My grandma started whispering. I was young, so I don't remember the exact interaction between them, but my uncle always said that random spirits needs their desire to be fulfilled. If you fulfill it within reasons, then that thing will leave you alone. So he asked again, "What do you want?" He did this in a pretty authoritative manner. Grandma replied, "I want kebab and samosas, non-vegetarian ones." At this point, it's almost 10:30 p.m. All the shops in our neighborhood were closed. So my dad and my other uncle went somewhere to go get it. When they came back and gave the paper bag to Grandma, she started sniffing the bag. She opened the bag, took one look inside, and started running. My grandma was around 115 kilograms at the time, so it was shocking watching her run like that. My entire family ran after her, except me and my cousins, who were too young. I started crying and praying, but after some time, everybody came home with Grandma. I didn't know what had happened. Till recently when my mom told me what happened. Grandpa ran to the end of our neighborhood, to the gate of our society. Indians will know what I mean. Passed out in the middle of the road. Then my dad and uncles carried Grandma to her house. After everything settled down, we asked Grandma if she remembered what had happened. She told us that she didn't remember a thing that happened in the last 3 hours. Now, 15 years later, and still, no one in my family talks about it. Ask Reddit. This happened when I was 17. When I was still living in my childhood home, I was sneaking out late at night to meet some friends. I went through the back door of the house, and as I turned to face the door, I could just feel somebody watching me. Thought I was busted. I turned to look at who had caught me. I saw a totally monochrome figure. The hair was completely black, like blacker than black. Her face was like a static washed over white and gray, and she was wearing a dress that was in between two colors. No facial features, just a silhouette of a young girl facing me. I reached for the door as fast as I could, and I went to shut it and close it very quickly on me. I bolted through my yard and onto the street. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. I stayed at my friend's that night. Soon after this happened, I was up late with my mom watching a movie. My dad had just passed away. We finished our movie up and said goodbye after turning the TV, stereo receiver, and DVD player, all with their own remotes. After a short amount of time in bed, I'm jarred awake by the sound of static with the speakers cranked up and the TV on with no input. My mom and I meet in the hallway, surprised to see that we had both been awoken to an empty house. A few years ago, when I was 23-ish, I graduated from college. I finally told my family about the first occurrence. Before I'm able to finish my description of the ghost, she finishes for me, telling me that her and her friend used to see a little girl in our backyard playing in a sundress. She said that she looked maybe 12. Our neighbor, who was the original owner, shared a story with us about the family that originally bought the house after it was built. It was a young family whose daughter passed away from leukemia. She would have been about the right age. And looking back, the girl wasn't scary or harmful. My sister had the same impression. To this day, I believe that what we saw, and, well, I believe what we saw and haven't seen anything like it ever since. And not to be pedantic, but if a color is in between two colors, then it is still a color with a name. Childhood home experiences. I'm an only child, and my parents and I moved into a home where they still live when I was 6 years old. From the first night in the house, I was terrified to sleep by myself. For most of my childhood, I either slept with my mom or she slept in my room with me. It was fine during the day, but at night sleeping was almost impossible. I always felt a feeling of dread and despair. From about the time we moved into the house until I was in my early teens, I had specific nightmares of a wolf-like creature. This creature had shaggy black fur and stood on its hind legs. It appeared to be a wolf and was always snarling and would usually run at me, at which point I would wake up terrified and run to my mom's bed if I wasn't already with her. The dreams would start off as normal dreams, always set in the house. I might be going about a normal activity, hanging out with family, going to the bathroom. Then all of a sudden, there's this wolf. At that point, the dream turned into a nightmare. As the years went on, the nightmares continued, but they did become less frequent. I believe I probably had the last of them by the time I was 13 or 14. I haven't dreamed about this creature for years, although I can still vividly see it in my mind. I found out years later that a man had shot himself in the house before we moved in. Several years after I moved in, my dad awoke one night to a figure standing at the foot of his bed. He swears that he was awake and not dreaming. The figure walked beside him and stopped. Believing it was a person, he put his arm out, but it went through it. The figure then walked through the nightstand and through the wall. He hasn't had any other encounters to my knowledge, and my assumption is that my bad energy created by the death of a previous inhabitant was fueling my nightmares and oppressive feelings as a child. As I grew up, I likely became less susceptible to it. Thus, it ended. I'm most curious to see if anyone else has encountered a creature anything like the wolf I described. I'm wondering if it was something evil that manifested itself in my dream, or was it just a figment of my childhood imagination? Weird dream or paranormal experience. I had an odd experience this morning, and while the rational part of me knows it was more likely a dream, thought it would be cool to share my experience and get other people's takes on it. So, To preface this, I am a believer of the paranormal. I believe I've had paranormal experiences in the past. I'm also a big believer of the idea that spirits find it easier to give people messages through dreams or when somebody's in a dreamlike state or close to sleep, so I can do so. I believe this mainly because ever since my maternal grandmother passed away in 2011, she's visited me several times in dreams to give me messages, which proved to be very accurate. Anyway, today I had to call out sick from work. I woke up with probably one of the worst migraines I'd ever experienced. It literally felt like somebody was crushing me, crushing my head. I could barely see, and seeing any sort of light was pure agony. After I rang out from work, I got back into bed and tried to sleep it off. After about a half hour or so, I was just starting to get close enough to fall back asleep, but the pain in my head suddenly became unbearable. It felt as if there was a group of people standing in my bedroom all just talking at once, trying to get my attention. This went on for a few minutes before I clearly heard my grandmother's voice telling me all the other voices to stop. Their voices were too prickly, as they put it. All of the other voices stopped. I heard my grandmother tell me that everything was going to be okay. I felt her put her hand on my head to stroke my hair, and the second her hand touched my head, my migraine completely disappeared. The other weird part of all this is that when it felt like the other voices were trying to get my attention, it didn't feel negative or scary. I just got a real familiar vibe from the voices, as if they were other relatives that had passed on. Realistically, I know this was probably some sort of weird sickness dream caused by the migraine I was having, but I'd love to hear other people's opinions on it. Was it a dream, or could I have actually had another paranormal experience? Has anyone experienced anything like this before? And if you have, maybe have an explanation as to what this might have been. Followed home. This past weekend, my husband and I tagged along with 2 Ohio paranormal investigation teams to check out Helltown in Ohio. We ended up officially joining one of the teams, so I'm excited for future adventures. Anyways, for anyone familiar, our research was conducted in the barn. And for the unfamiliar people, the barn is one of the few structures still standing. It's located in between a huge field in the woods. Things were going pretty smooth, till a few hours in things started picking up and we actually had a few decent things happen. Things started picking up when the whole group, 7 of us total, gathered in a small room and stall area to conduct an EVP session. As everybody was standing completely still and quiet, everybody could hear somebody walking around outside of the room. A few of us heard voices. We originally thought some other investigators showed up, but when we went out, no one was in the barn or the field outside of it. My husband and a couple of other people went downstairs to look. Plain as day, they heard whistling. If you know, you know. I've conditioned my husband to know the rules, but he volunteered as tribute to go and look around. Luckily, nothing happened and we couldn't find the source of the whistle, but we decided to do another EVP session down there. As we're all standing silent again, everybody starts seeing shadows running past the windows and gaps between the boards and the walls. After everybody calmed down from that, we decided to try to get one more EVP session in. We decided to do it in the upstairs room before we packed up and headed out. As soon as we started once again, we could hear somebody walking around. It got to the point that I was so spooked that I was done. I wanted to go home. We all gathered our stuff and as a group started the 20-minute walk back to our cars. Before we left the area, we stopped. We did a spirit box session and all told the spirits that they weren't allowed to go home with us. Evidently, that didn't work. The night before last, my sister came down and said that she could hear someone walking around her room on the other side of the curtains. The floor is really creaky, so it's really hard to miss footsteps. Yes, Gecko. Then last night I woke up at 3 to use the bathroom. As I was laying there trying to fall back asleep, I heard somebody running back and forth across from my house, at least 3 or 4 times. Then he heard what sounded like a heavy dresser being pushed across a wood floor. Mind you, I have all carpeted floors. I was terrified and almost woke my husband up to look around. After a few minutes of silence, I got the courage to see if one of my kids was up. They were all passed out snoring. I cleansed my house today, and sounded like a crazy person screaming at whatever it was to get out. So we'll see how things go tonight. If you made it all the way through, thanks for reading. Hope you enjoyed it. My childhood experience. I studied in an all-girls convent school during my childhood. Due to personal reasons, my father had to drop me off at school extremely early. You can say that I was the first student to reach school every day. So, to reach my class, I have to take a long staircase. Then I take a left turn and then another left and a right where I'm now at the beginning of the main hallway. At the end of the hallway, you can take a right and use the stairs. Then you go back downstairs. Now, every morning, I would take a right into the main hallway. I would always see a white misty figure at the end of the hallway for like a split second. It always seemed like the figure was shocked to see me, would run downstairs. So I would always see a white misty figure fleeting to the right, where the stairs are, whenever I turned to the hallway, and this happened every day for a year until my class changed. I was always a skeptic, but as a child, you still have a tiny little fear of what it was. I would pretend like I never saw it, and I'd quietly go to my class. I always tried to think that my eyes were playing a trick on me, tried to believe that it wasn't real, but it was just too real. I could always figure out the head, waist, and thin legs whenever I saw it. And strangely enough, during that period of my life, I started having sleep paralysis. I also had sleepwalking problems. I would have episodes, not frequently though. Episodes where my eyes wouldn't budge, body being able to move, and the feeling of an excruciatingly heavy thing sitting on my chest. This thing wouldn't allow me to breathe. One night I had a horrible episode. I was sleeping on my side when my eyes opened and my body couldn't move. I was scared as fuck. There was some pitch black, long-haired person behind the headboard of my bed just leaning over me, hair dangling over me. I could see it from the corner of my eye. Thankfully, I was sleeping on my side and not on my back, coming face to face with it. I used to have sleepwalking episodes during my early childhood. It only consisted of me just sitting cross-legged on my bed mumbling something before going back to sleep. It had stopped for a while. But during that time, I sleepwalked again, getting out of my bed and going to my parents' bedroom where I stood in front of the closet door, raised both my fists, and hit it hard. The sound woke up my parents. Well, they got so scared. Poor them. They shook me and I woke up. These events only happened during that year. I have no clear answers as to why this happened. I keep dreaming the same distant family member goes missing. For the past 3 nights, I've experienced the same reoccurring dream about a distant family member who went missing years ago. We were likely around the same age at the time. I was about 7 or 8 years old when it happened. In the dream, I'm a child again, staying at a family member's house. The setting is familiar, with the interior furniture matching what I remember from my childhood. I can even see myself as a child in the mirror in the second guest room. In this dream, I get up to go get water. As I do, I hear a noise. I hesitantly approach the sound and witness my distant relative being taken away by intruders. It's important to note that I wasn't at this family member's house the night that she disappeared. We received the news of her disappearance the following day. In the dream, I try to intervene by waking up other family members or attempting to call the police. But despite my efforts, she still ends up missing. I'll be graduating from college with a forensics degree, and well, I wonder if the nature of my studies is contributing to these reoccurring dreams. Gecko agrees. Although I hardly knew this relative, my grandparents knew her better than I did at that young age. I'm curious about the meaning of these dreams and why they're occurring now after all these years. It's been a long time. There's never been any resolution to what happened to her. All loops eventually close. The turning over of my apple cart, just when I had it all figured out. The incidents I chronicle in the following account are true. Happened in 2009 in the northeastern U.S. I went to visit my daughter and her family one evening. They live in a rural area that's quite dark at night due to lack of ambient lighting. I exited my car and began to walk across the yard toward their house. The darkness was such that I couldn't see anything before me. However, I was familiar with the property. As I was walking, I came to an abrupt stop and raised my arms in front of me. Not by conscious choosing, but my body sensed something before me. Instinct. Thinking it may be a yard toy, I kicked outward, but nothing was there. I immediately heard a light rustling. It was distant, but approached my position rapidly. The initial sensing of my path being blocked grew stronger. I then saw from across the opposite end of the darkened yard a figure moving swiftly toward me. The figure was moving so rapid that it appeared as a blur approaching and departing. It was only when it passed me, and it was for a split second aligned with me on my left, that I got a close glimpse. But for a nanosecond, it headed straight at me. It only veered to my left at the last possible moment. Its description was as follows. I estimate a height of 8 feet. This is based on comparing my height of 6 feet 3 inches. However, the figure glided and was leaning forward at an almost 45-degree angle. It didn't contact the ground and wore a classic monk-type robe, brown with black smudges. The material was worn and tattered. The hood drastically draped down over the facial area, obscuring any facial features. In passing, it never looked at me. Its body posture and head remained straight ahead, but again in a leaning forward, slanted position. Its movement in passing me created an audible swishing. I stepped forward while looking in the direction of the house. This one step triggered their motion, which snapped their floodlights on, but I kept watching what passed me until it disappeared into the darkness. Total time after passing me when losing sight of it, maybe 3 to 4 seconds. When I entered the house, I attempted to tell my daughter what just happened. She held her finger up to her lips and in a low voice said, "Don't say anything around Steve. He's already nervous about us living so close to the old barn." Note, Steve grew up believing the barn was haunted. Still trying to get a grip, I said, "Okay, probably my imagination." I gave her what I had and went out to take, and said I had to scoot for a few more errands. We hugged and I walked this time across a well-lit yard to my car. I got in, and instead of going in the direction of what passed me, I went the opposite way. After a few minutes, I saw the lights of the Sheetz store. I whipped in, found a parking spot, and stared off thinking about what I just experienced. This, I knew, it really happened. What I saw was all the pictures and literature throughout my life. They all depicted it, the Grim Reaper. So, why am I still alive? Why did it turn from me at the last second? That was Saturday evening. On Sunday morning, woke up at 5:30 a.m., which is very unusual for me. Also unusual was that I awoke fully. No momentary grogginess, bright-eyed. I moved to the edge of the bed and watched the early sun streaming in through the half-closed slats. The room was silent. Before I could stand, a long, single musical note from a trumpet came from the right corner of the room. It started low but rose in volume and lasted about 5 to 7 seconds. Then the room was again dead silent. I didn't have to look outside to determine a source. The trumpet sound was generated within the room. The acoustics of the sound made that determination unmistakable. But no one and nothing was there visibly to generate it. I went through Sunday encountering several people who I almost told about the trumpet note, and even the sighting of the entity. I thought better of that and kept it to myself, feeling that before blurting things of that nature out to those around me, I wanted to first figure it out. At 6 p.m. Sunday, I watched the movie The Untouchables. Halfway through, I called my dad, who lived in a family home 45 minutes away. I knew he liked the movie, so I checked in. After talking for a while, I said, "Hey, I want to tell you something that happened to me early this morning. You're the first person that I've told, and you're going to think I'm nuts." Surprisingly, instead of laughing, there was a short pause from his end. "Okay," he said. "You tell me what happened to you, then I'll tell you what happened to me this morning." He told me that around 3 a.m. this morning he was awoken by the doorbell. It had an unusual sound to it, like it was only partly pressed in. Then it was released. It was followed seconds later with the identical sound. I said, "Who was it?" He said that he didn't go to see and stayed where he was. It was damn odd, and I wasn't going to move from the bed. Very unusual for Dad, a very unparanormal guy. 5 days later, I received a call from my stepsister telling my dad that he had just died. He hadn't been ill or been diagnosed with any conditions. He was 79, a heart attack. So, I'm left with questions. My dad and I were the same size and closely resembled each other. We also shared the same first, last, and middle name. Did this entity resemble a reaper mistaking me for my dad and course correct at the last few seconds? Was the doorbell ringing at his house a reaper entity waiting Dad to answer the door, at which point Dad would have died then? Was the trumpet I heard in the bedroom an announcement of Dad's impending death? 13 years later, the answer, I surmise, only caused, discomfort. I wish it hadn't occurred, but it did. I would hope that the Grim Reaper's Rolodex is more accurate and is based off something more than just your name. I hope. Rob, come here." An urgent voice, out of place. I got back from my annual physical yesterday afternoon. My wife was in the back room. We were the only people in the house. I was in the front of the house in the kitchen. That's when I heard a loud female voice say, "Rob." It came from the foyer. I walked from the kitchen through the dining room leading into the foyer and did so quickly due to the voice having an urgent tone. I got to the foyer, no one was there. I said, Hey. No reply except my wife saying, "What?" I walked back bewildered to the kitchen, knowing the voice was real, it wasn't distant. It had an acoustical sound of being in the house and in the foyer. I'd only taken 2 steps back into the kitchen and heard, "Rob, come here!" This time the voice came from the left corner of the living room, and its urgency wasn't distress. It was an order. I was in the living room within 2 seconds. Nothing. No one. I said, "Hey, hello." My wife walked in from the back of the house to find me sitting in the living room chair. She asked me what I wanted and what was wrong. I just said, "Hang on, wait a minute. What?" After about 30 seconds, I asked her to sit down, and I told her the best of what just happened. She asked me if it was a male or female voice. I said female. She asked if I recognized the voice. I said no. I don't hear disembodied voices in my house at 1:30 in the afternoon, but I did yesterday, loud and clear. Weird footsteps and ghostly experiences at home. I don't know how to start this, but whenever I go to sleep at night, almost all nights, I hear footsteps in the above house. No one lives there. It's been in a commercial office pretty much the entire time. I've seen it open only a few times, when no one's up there at night. It's empty, all the people go home by 7. But almost every night at around 2 a.m. I hear the footsteps, even if there are people in the daytime. You never hear those footsteps in the daytime. It's always at night. I haven't told this to anybody at home or asked them if they hear the same thing. Every time I go up near the office, I had this weird negative feeling and something telling me not to go any further. Does anybody know how I just stopped the sound of these footsteps? There's been a psychic at her home some months ago. They told us there's some kind of spirit here. I've had some ghostly experiences at home as well. The last time I remember, I had got up at night to have some water. I went to the kitchen, drank the water, kept the glass on the kitchen platform. Out of nowhere, when I kept the glass down, after a few seconds, the glass was vibrating and moving toward me. I got scared, just put the glass back to where I originally kept it before. And after that, I just went and slept with my mom out of fear. An orb. I like to go ghost hunting just to see if stuff was real. There was a spot where a 2-lane road was raised up to make, way for train tracks. But the road was really too skinny. You couldn't see over the top, so there were head-on collisions all the time. It was a side road that went through the forest, but sort of busy because it connected 2 main areas. It was a death trap. I'm not sure if it had gates for when trains were coming. People would say they would see weird stuff at night, so we went to check it out. We walked into the forest near it. We got to about 60 feet away from the road, and there was a floating blue orb, just sort of crackling like electricity. It was about 1 foot in diameter, floating about 5 feet off the ground, about 15 feet away from a group of 4 of us, 12 feet away from the tracks. All of us saw it. We looked at each other, looked back, still there. Stayed the same size and elevation, but slowly moved around. It lasted about 2, maybe 3 minutes. We stayed 15 feet away, but moved around at probably 180 degrees just to make sure that we were seeing this thing and it was real. Couldn't be from another source. Came a little closer to us and then just sank into the ground. We were hoping to see a ghost. Hadn't anticipated an orb. Never heard of that before. Thoughts on cats' paranormal abilities. I'm an atheist, and a skeptic in general, but I saw what I saw. I know cats have been worshipped, and wondering if there's actually any meaning behind it. First time posting here, I think, but I want to give some stories and wondering if people have similar stories or ideas about how things are possible. Some things are debatable, some things aren't. But I fully believe my cat could teleport, read minds, and, send his spirit places. Easiest example. I know cats are quick and crafty, but I would be in one room, walk down the singular hallway, and he would be waiting there in the bed, not even panting. There's one way to travel this location, and I just walked it. He didn't pass me. When he saw my surprise, he would give me this knowingly grin. It was so freaky. He did it all the time. One time there's an addition to the house, and I bought that had a singular dud bolt lock that no one had a key for. He liked messing with me in general, and sometimes ultra scary, sometimes playful. This was one of the times where we had the look of I'm gonna F you up, bro. So I stayed in the addition to the house. The door was glass, and he was pacing in front of the glass door sort of like a lion waiting for his food. I could barely sleep. I have the strangest dream of being attacked by a werewolf. I wake up to claw marks on my back, and he's in the fucking room. Door's still locked. I checked for holes and everything, and nothing. No one has a key that could have let them in. I certainly wouldn't have let them in. That's why I was in the room to begin with. Sometimes I would let him out, but then I would turn around and he's inside. It's 30 degrees out. There's no drafts or entryways or anyone else home. He couldn't have gotten there that fast even if there was. One time only my brother and I were playing video games. Just let him outside and lock the door. He literally apparated about 5 feet in the air right in front of us. He had the look of, I botched this one. Scurried off. Brother and I both saw him exit and reappear. No one else is home. No physical way of entry. Plus, we always see him walk over. For sure, we would have seen him. Plus, 5 foot's a pretty crazy high jump. Your face could be a statue. He would know exactly your thoughts and make specific reactions. Probably one of the weirder ones is I moved 1,000 miles away and the cat stayed with my brothers who would visit me in the ghost form just to mess with me. They'd be studying, watching TV, and a green ghost version would walk in, give like a "what's up?" sometimes like a meow, and then walk through the other wall. I wasn't drinking, I wasn't on drugs, and I wasn't sleep deprived. He'd do that about once a month. Well, what I can tell you for sure is you definitely like your cat. Two people seeing the same ghost at the same time. I'm a skeptic, but some of my in-laws have gifts for seeing ghosts. They don't make it a thing, just something hereditary, and sometimes they see them. My mind always thinks there's a logical explanation, especially when it's just one person experiencing it. I don't know about two. My son-in-law has the gift, and so do some of her kids. Or, sister-in-law, one of those two. They don't try to use it or build it. They don't even like talking about it much. When asking the kids if they saw something, it's like as if they wet the bed type of a response. Seems genuine and unwanted. They went to the cemetery to visit their great-grandfather. As they were driving away, they saw a funeral going on for somebody else, and my sister-in-law or son-in-law, whatever SIL stands for, and my nephew noticed a young girl in a white dress with the black hair standing 40 feet away from them, but 20 feet from the rest of that group. So they started asking why this lone girl was away from the rest. No one could see her, except those two. There were 3 other people in the car, but they stopped, wondering why nobody else could see her. She looked strange, but not a typical style see-through ghost. Almost like a regular person. I normally wouldn't think anything of it, but they both were described the same way, the same entity in the same place without, playing off each other or having an incentive to make it up. The son was about 14. His mom, where the two saw it, or rather, he and his mom, going nuts trying to figure out, why nobody else could see her. Look, white dress, black hair, left at that tree all by herself. How do you not see her? Insight badly needed. Reoccurring dream of a Q banshee. I dream of ghosts and demons a little too much for my liking. But there's this one spirit that seems to reappear in my dreams that make me wonder if it's more than just dream phenomenon. Both times they were sleep paralysis dreams. All demon dreams are. But usually the demons are distant. They frighten me, but other than my wraith dream, wraith, usually they don't try to hurt me. Previous dreams, I've woken up and I've continued my day normal, despite how creepy the dream. The first time I had that banshee dream, I was living with my grandmother. I felt something caressing my shoulder. It wasn't a dream, so I assumed it was my cat who in real life was sleeping with me when I fell asleep. However, when I turned my head to see my cat, I was greeted by this rotting old woman's face. A hag is what it looked like. I thought it was one until it started screaming in my ear louder than those screeching fire alarms. I'd look away and it would stop. I'd look back and it would scream again. The second time of this dream horrified me beyond comprehension. It's in the house I'm currently in with my roommate. The closet door was open both in the dream and in the waking world. I saw the same hag. She screamed as well, however she was growing taller as she did. It was a lot more menacing than any other demon dream I've had. She started screaming louder, and louder until I was forced awake. The reason why this dream horrified me more than any other was because when I woke up, my ear was ringing violently. It was as if somebody took a trumpet and blared it into my ear. Insight here would be greatly appreciated. Two strange incidents in my time that have certainly left me scared. For my first incident, I was around 10-12 at this time, doing normal kid things. It was possibly around noon at this time. I was grounded, for I don't even know anymore. Standing on the edge of my bed, and I had an old wooden bed. I would stand on the outside frame. As I was standing there, I looked at my currently open door. I saw a 7-foot-tall red figure standing in that doorway. I only recount as well as I can because I was well over a decade ago, but somehow remember this all so well when I saw the figure. I wasn't even scared. But at the same time, it was scary but felt alright. Ever since I saw that figure, I feel as though I'm no longer alone. That's when I started always to feel more paranoid over being in the dark and such. I know it's a normal thing for people to be scared of the dark. Still, I always feel I see someone watching me. It makes me kind of uneasy. This incident certainly made my life feel like I was always having someone watching me. When I'm in a room alone, it feels as if I hear no noises and something shouting at me to watch out, like my fight or flight response is constant. What I saw that day made no sense. I feel as though it had weirdly impacted me. I'm kind of unsure, and I hope maybe somebody has an idea of what it could be. My second incident does make me kind of feel it's connected in some way to the first. I am a skeptic, and this is more recent, maybe a few months ago. The main reason I say I'm a skeptic is that I don't try to make up spooky ghost events or something to freak people out. If I do have a creepy event happen, then that's what I share. I was at a friend's house, watching a movie in the pitch black. It was late at night when the movie finished and the screen went dark. We were both relaxing. We started talking about nonsense topics like life, and, well, life is the opposite of that, but I was looking around the room and I saw a gesture in the corner like it was lifelike, like a dream. It was just the mask and gloves. I got scared, told my friend about it. It was when the entire room felt like it shifted. The room got heavy, like breathing felt like it wasn't an option. I wanted to break out a spirit box app that I had on my phone just because it was something that we both were into and decided it sounded fun. We did the usual making sure nothing attached to us and whatnot. We both had been asking questions around the lines of "Are you here?" and such. We heard a deep voice say something. Not entirely sure what it was, but I know that it was something that made us turn it off because it unsettled us. We had noticed the room started to get cold and a standing lamp that they had in the room started to rattle. The light started to get off more heat than it should have. After that, it kept just getting more eerie. We wanted to turn the standing mirror around because it kept giving us the creeps. We did that, and then I decided to head out. When my friends went back into the room, he sent me a Snapchat of a very large cut across the back of the mirror that we both knew for a fact wasn't there just a minute ago. As I was driving home, I kept feeling like something was in the car with me, watching me. We had called that night after I made it home, and I should add that this is the same home as the first story too. During the night, my friend heard my mic pick up scratching noises coming from my door. I know none of my family would have messed with anyone's sleep. Also, it was around 3 a.m. I've since moved to a new house, and even in the new house, I still get weird vibes. I have had a few incidences with footsteps loud enough that you could think it's somebody else in the house when it's just me. A shadow figure watching me while I was in the living room that my roommate saw when she looked over down the hall. My door is a mirror. She saw it reflecting off my door, and my roommate alone in the house heard scratching on the interior doors. Just a lot of weirdness that only seems to occur on my side of the house. Again, I want to know what you guys think. I know I posted a wall of text, but I hope somebody has theories or something to help because I'm unsure of what follows me, if it's good or bad. I just want to know what it might be. There's someone in my bedroom. I wanted to start by saying that I've always been a non-believer. 32 years of laughing off or explaining away paranormal phenomena, but that all changed a few months ago. I live in an old property with a past. In World War II, the whole row of former guest houses were used as internment camps. I've lived there for 4 uneventful years until a few years ago. I heard somebody come in the room and get into bed with me. Thought it was my partner, but there was no one there. After that, the bedsheets started to be pulled off my shoulder and feet, and I decided to be brave. Put the light on and look. No one was there. It was 3 a.m. and my partner had gone to sleep in the spare room. He does this quite regularly due to different schedules. About 1 month ago, I had another event. Someone pacing around the room. I was terrified and eventually looked out, but no one was there. It was 3:33 a.m. Last night I heard somebody run from the door over to the bed and jumped in. Each time my blood runs cold and I start shaking. It was not as late this time, about midnight. Anyway, I don't know what to think. Am I imagining it? Why, if real, would a ghost turn up suddenly after 4 years of no activity? But the way I know this isn't a not safe for work post, but said it. Well, what are they saying here? Let's see. I don't know what they're saying at the end. Next story. My personal demon encounter as a Creepy Hollow, Texas volunteer. So I volunteered maybe a few seasons years back. My job was to sit in a giant metal cage in the Fear Factory, the zombie-style exhibit, scream at people, bang on walls, telling them I wanted to eat them. Normally, we had 2 or 3 people in this cage, but this time it was just me due to staffing issues. Going through my night, I just did my job, even won a Best Scare Award for single-handedly doing the job. On my quote-unquote floor, it was just me and another volunteer who went up and down the stairs fairly regularly. At around 11-ish at night, I started to smell sulfur and ammonia. I looked in the corner, and to my surprise, I see a giant figure standing crouched over in the corner. The room was roughly 8 feet tall, and it was closer to 10 or maybe 12. I looked at it, and the best description I've managed to come up with is this Slender Man-style figure, except everything was black and scratchy, just like the pictures every kid in horror movies draw on when they show their parents their friend. You know, when they sketch one out with the black ink. The only other description of this being I remember over the years was those piercing yellow eyes. It was like they stared right into my soul. The other volunteer was, of course, downstairs while this was taking place. A few customers could come by, and I don't know if they could have seen it or what, but they would always walk right past it without a second glance. After a few customers walked past, I heard it speak. I heard it calling my full legal name. I went by JP, so nobody actually knew my name. At this point, I was terrified. I didn't know what was happening. I had some false sense of security from the cage I was locked in, though. I looked away and just started praying. As I was praying, I kept my eyes shut tight. Can't explain what that thing was or why it came after me, but I'll tell you those 5 minutes of praying felt like an eternity. I consistently felt this thing slowly but surely creeping up on me. Then it vanished. The smell of sulfur and ammonia was gone. The other volunteer came up the stairs. Customers kept coming through the rest of the night, and I never volunteered there again. After I talked with some buddies, they all told me the sulfur and ammonia smell meant it was probably a demon, but I truthfully don't know. If you have any questions, or could help me better understand what happened that night, please ask me or let me know. And to anybody who's made it to the end, thank you so much for listening. Sweet dreams.